Massive stone circles were engineered to capture the solstice sun. This was no accident. It was an ancient science, a way of writing celestial knowledge directly into the landscape. From the misty hills of Britain to the heart of the Mayan world, prehistoric builders created monuments that functioned as precise calendars and observatories. By the end of this, you will see these silent stones not as ruins, but as complex machines for tracking the cosmos. We will uncover how they marked the sun's extreme path, predicted terrifying eclipses, and even aligned entire cities with the stars. Why would cultures without writing invest generations in such a monumental task? The collective breath of a community hangs in the frigid air, their eyes fixed on the dark entrance to the great tomb. Then, for a few precious minutes on the shortest day of the year, a narrow beam of sunlight pierces the long passage, flooding the inner chamber with a golden light that had not been seen for a full year. At Newgrange in Ireland, this was the winter solstice, a moment of cosmic rebirth engineered into stone 5,000 years ago. This was not a happy accident. It was the result of generations of careful observation, a deliberate targeting of the sun's southernmost rising point on the horizon. These solstitial markers, capturing the sun at its extreme northern and southern limits, are the bedrock of ancient astronomical architecture. Think of them as the anchor points of the entire year. For a society dependent on the land, knowing precisely when the sun would begin its return, bringing longer days and the promise of spring planting, was a matter of survival. This knowledge was their calendar, their clock, and a core part of their spiritual life. The achievement is staggering. To build a structure that captures a single, specific solar event requires a deep, long-term understanding of the sky. The builders did not just align stones to stones. They often used the distant natural landscape, lining up the tomb's entrance with a specific notch on a faraway hill, a sight line established through decades, perhaps even centuries, of patient watching. This same precision is found at Machu in Scotland, where the setting winter solstice sun sends a shaft of light straight down its long, narrow passageway. How did they do it without telescopes or written records? Their success speaks to a profound communal dedication. The value of predicting the sun's turning point was so immense that it justified a project spanning human lifetimes. And this deep focus on the sun's journey did not stop at its extremes. Once you can mark the boundaries of the sun's path, the next logical step is to find its center, the balanced point it crosses on its way north and south. This central path of the sun, the equinox, was a moment of profound cosmic harmony. At the ancient Mayan city of Chichen Itza during the spring equinox, a spectacular event unfolds. As the sun sets, the stepped corners of the Great Pyramid, El Castillo, cast a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase. These shadows connect with stone serpent heads at the base, creating the undulating body of a massive, illuminated serpent descending from the heavens. This was the feathered serpent god Cuculcan making his annual descent to Earth. This breathtaking display, which still draws thousands of witnesses today, was no theatrical trick. It was a precise astronomical instrument built in stone, marking a day of perfect balance. The equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length, represented a fundamental equilibrium in the universe. Unlike the dramatic turning points of the solstices, the equinox captured a fleeting moment of celestial symmetry, a concept that resonated deeply with ancient ideas of cosmic order and renewal. Pinpointing this day of balance required a different kind of genius. According to research by the pioneering scholar Anthony Aveni, tracking the equinox demanded a more subtle approach than marking the sun's extreme positions. It often involved carefully bisecting the sun's long, yearly journey along the horizon, finding the exact midpoint between its northern and southern limits. This was an act of advanced geometry performed on a landscape scale. The knowledge required to do this did not appear overnight. It was the result of centuries of patient, meticulous observation, a long-term project of record-keeping that spanned generations. On the Mediterranean island of Malta, the Mnajdra temple complex embodies this search for balance. On the equinoxes, the first rays of the sun pass directly through a meticulously shaped doorway, projecting a perfect rectangle of light onto a central stone slab, likely an altar. This was not a public spectacle for thousands, but a more intimate, perhaps deeply spiritual, observance. The light's arrival at that exact spot signaled a moment of harmony, a time for rituals tied to the Earth cycles. How did a society without written language sustain the focus needed to identify these subtle annual events? It suggests a culture so attuned to the rhythms of the sky that this knowledge became a central pillar of their identity, passed down through stories, ceremonies, and the very alignment of their most sacred spaces. Yet mastering the steady, predictable pulse of the sun was only the beginning. The real astronomical challenge, one that would push ancient sky watchers to their absolute limits, was the far more complex and unpredictable dance of the moon. The moon presented a far more difficult problem than the sun. Its movements are a complex, wobbling dance across the sky, its rising and setting points shifting along the horizon in a slow, majestic rhythm that takes 18.6 years to complete. To track the moon's extremes, its so-called major and minor standstills required a commitment spanning a human generation. This was not a task for a single astronomer, but for a lineage of sky watchers. At places like Stonehenge, generations would have spent long nights patiently recording where the moon crept over the distant hills, marking the slow swing from its most northerly path to its most southerly one, and back again. The sheer fact that these lunar alignments exist tells us something profound. It means knowledge was not just remembered, it was systematically and accurately passed down from elder to apprentice for decades. The moon's path is less predictable than the steady sun, a challenge that must have consumed their intellectual lives. The scholar Gerald Hawkins, who first decoded many of these lunar patterns, suggested that the great stones were arranged to frame these extreme moonrises and moonsets. The famous heel stone, for instance, often associated with the summer solstice sun, also aligns with the moon at its southernmost rising point, a clever dual purpose that shows an integrated understanding of both great lights in the sky. Even more remarkably, the circle of 56 Aubrey holes that surround the site may have functioned as a kind of primitive computer. By moving markers from hole to hole each year, they could have modeled the entire 18.6-year lunar cycle, predicting its behavior far into the future. Why would a culture pour so much effort into mapping a cycle that takes nearly a lifetime to observe? It hints at a motive far beyond simple calendar keeping. This deep, generational knowledge of the moon's rhythm held a terrifying and awesome power. It was the key to predicting the most dramatic and feared events in the ancient sky, moments when the cosmic order itself seemed to break. That deep, generational knowledge of the moon's rhythm held a terrifying and awesome power. It was the key to predicting the most dramatic and feared events in the ancient sky. Imagine the sheer terror as daylight suddenly vanishes, the world plunging into an unnatural twilight, and the sun itself seems to be swallowed by a dark, creeping shadow. For a prehistoric society, a solar eclipse was a moment of pure cosmic chaos, a sign that the fundamental order of the universe was breaking. Now, imagine the absolute authority of the individual who could stand before the people and announce that this terrifying event was coming. The ability to forecast an eclipse was the pinnacle of ancient astronomy, transforming blind fear into a controlled, ritualized spectacle. This was not just stargazing, it was a form of social power, cementing the authority of a ruling class that could seemingly command the heavens themselves. To achieve this, sky watchers had to master the intricate dance between the sun and the moon, understanding a complex cycle known as the Saros. This is a pattern of eclipses that repeats every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. How could a culture without writing track such a long and precise cycle? The monuments themselves provided the answer, functioning as a permanent, stone-based almanac. While it remains a topic of debate, some researchers point to the circle of 56 Aubrey holes at Stonehenge as a potential eclipse predictor. The mathematics is compelling, as 3 of these Saros cycles, which would take about 54 years, is a close approximation to the 56 markers in the circle. By moving stones or posts around this circle year after year, initiated keepers of the knowledge could model the celestial cycles and anticipate the rare moments when the sun and moon would meet in the sky for an eclipse. In ancient Mesopotamia, this data was kept on clay tablets. In pre-literate Europe, the landscape and its massive stone rings were the living record. This pursuit marks a profound shift in human thought, a move from simply observing the sky to actively predicting its behavior. It was the birth of a predictive science, a testament to the human drive to find order in the cosmos. And this quest for celestial order did not stop with the sun and moon. The fixed, timeless patterns of the stars offered a different kind of map, one that guided not just rituals but entire civilizations. The stars offered a fixed map in the heavens, a constant guide in a world of change. While the sun and moon moved in their daily rhythms, the star patterns wheeled through the night with a dependable regularity that ancient cultures sought to mirror on the Earth. Yet this stellar map was not entirely permanent. It drifted in a slow, majestic cycle that takes 26,000 years to complete, a phenomenon known as the precession of the equinoxes. This means the night sky witnessed by the pyramid builders is not the same sky we see today. To align a monument with a star required not only pinpoint accuracy, but also an awareness of this grand cosmic clock. Proving these alignments today is one of the greatest challenges in archaeoastronomy, because a perfect alignment from 4,500 years ago will be visibly off by a significant degree now. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a testament to this incredible precision. Its builders somehow managed to align its massive sides almost perfectly to the cardinal directions, with an error of less than 1/15 of a single degree. How did they achieve such accuracy without modern tools? They likely turned their eyes to the northern sky, focusing on the circumpolar stars that never set. At the time the Great Pyramid was built, the star Thuban in the constellation of Draco was the pole star. It was around this seemingly immovable point that the entire heavens rotated. Deep within the pyramid, narrow shafts were built, pointing directly from the king's chamber toward this celestial pole. This was not for ventilation, but for a spiritual purpose, a conduit for the pharaoh's soul to ascend and join the eternal, undying stars. Across the Atlantic, in the Americas, different star patterns held profound meaning. The Pleiades star cluster, a tiny, shimmering group visible to the naked eye, was a critical marker for the Maya and the Inca, signaling the beginning of the agricultural season and dictating the timing of sacred ceremonies. The Big Dipper was woven into creation myths. The entire city of Teotihuacan in Mexico was laid out on a grid that many researchers believe was deliberately aligned with the Pleiades or other significant stars as they set on the horizon. To test these theories, scholars like Giulio Magli used sophisticated software to rewind the sky, calculating the precise positions of stars millennia ago. When a temple's main axis points directly to the spot where a culturally important star rose or set, it is difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. What does this choice of a specific star reveal? It tells us that the cosmos was deeply interwoven with mythology. The stones were not just pointing at lights in the sky, they were connecting the earthly realm to the stories of gods and ancestors, creating a sacred geography that linked the world of the living with the journey into the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, a perfect astronomical alignment was a literal gateway to eternity. This was not about predicting seasons or planting crops. It was about securing a pharaoh's place among the imperishable stars. Their entire funerary architecture was a machine for the soul, designed to launch the deceased king on his final cosmic journey. The narrow shafts deep inside the Great Pyramid, precisely targeted at the pole star Thuban, were not ventilation ducts or sight lines for the living. They were spiritual conduits, a physical pathway carved through millions of stones to connect the king's burial chamber directly with the eternal, undying circumpolar stars. In their belief, the soul of the pharaoh would travel up this shaft to join the gods in a realm beyond death, a realm mirrored by the predictable, unchanging heavens. This profound spiritual need explains the obsessive, almost unimaginable precision of their alignments. An error of even a single finger's width in the foundation could mean the difference between immortality and oblivion. This celestial connection was woven into their very geography. The River Nile, flowing from south to north, was the earthly counterpart to the Milky Way stretching across the night sky. Just as the dead were buried on the Nile's western bank, where the sun set, their souls were believed to travel to the western horizon to begin their ascent. In the Valley of the Kings, many tombs are oriented so that their long, descending corridors point toward the dense band of the Milky Way, transforming the tomb into a boat that would carry the deceased along this celestial river. This symbolic astronomy required a complete fusion of science and faith. The same priests who charted the stars also presided over the rituals of death and rebirth. Their astronomical knowledge was a sacred, protected secret because it held the keys to the afterlife. This deep spiritual imperative is what mobilized entire societies. How do you convince thousands of people to dedicate their lives to hauling multi-ton stones? You offer them a role in a cosmic drama, a chance to build a ladder to heaven for a god-king whose well-being was tied to the very fate of the nation. The solstice light flooding Newgrange's inner chamber was likely seen not just as a calendar event, but as a moment of spiritual recharge, the sun's life force penetrating the womb of the earth to awaken the souls within. These monuments were not just aligned with the cosmos, they were seen as active participants within it, sacred points where the boundaries between the human world and the divine realm became thin and permeable. To truly understand why these stones were placed with such care, we must look past their function as observatories and see them as they were intended, portals to the stars. The stones themselves were only part of the instrument. The true genius of ancient astronomy often lay in the landscape that surrounded them. Stand among the Callanish stones on the Isle of Lewis, and you are not just in a circle of monoliths, you are inside a vast natural observatory. The complex, undulating horizon here was not an obstacle, it was the primary tool. The great stones acted as precise foresights and backsights, framing the rising and setting of the moon and sun against specific notches on distant mountain peaks. This is the method of horizon astronomy, an approach that is both elegantly simple and incredibly sophisticated. Instead of building everything from scratch, these cultures integrated their sacred knowledge directly into the local terrain. A particular hill, a solitary valley, or a unique cleft in the rocks could become permanently associated with the summer solstice sunrise or the winter full moon. This required an intimate, generational knowledge of the local environment, a deep familiarity passed down through stories and seasonal rituals. The pioneering archaeoastronomer Alexander Thom traveled across Britain meticulously studying these sites. He proposed that the builders used a standardized unit of measurement and achieved alignments of breathtaking precision. While some of his specific conclusions are still debated by scholars, his work revealed a widespread pattern, a common astronomical language written into the land from Scotland to Cornwall. A perfect example of this harmony between nature and architecture exists at Machu Picchu. There, on the morning of the winter solstice, an observer standing at the sacred Intihuatana stone would see the sun rise directly through a carefully chosen notch in the distant mountains, a slit in the stone world designed by nature and recognized by human genius. This method made celestial observation a communal, repeatable event. You did not need a specialized priesthood to read the sky from a secluded temple. The entire community could witness the sun's rebirth through the sacred notch, turning their entire world into a living, breathing calendar. What does the choice of a specific mountain peak or a solitary valley tell us? It reveals that these cultures did not see the landscape as separate from the cosmos. They sacralized their environment, weaving celestial events into the very hills they called home. And to refine their readings of this grand natural instrument, they began to create smaller, portable tools to hold the sky in their hands. The manipulation of light itself became the ultimate expression of ancient astronomical genius. At the Temple of Abu Simbel in Egypt, a phenomenon unfolds with clockwork precision twice each year. On dates aligned with the pharaoh's birthday and coronation day, the rising sun shoots a beam of light over 60 meters deep into the mountain-carved sanctuary. It illuminates 3 of the 4 seated statues in the inner darkness, leaving only the god of the underworld, Ptah, forever in shadow. This was not a simple alignment, it was a choreographed performance in stone, a deliberate act of engineering that required a complete understanding of the sun's changing angle over the seasons. To achieve this, the architects had to calculate the exact height and angle of the doorway so that the sun would reach its target on 2 specific days and no others. Think of the immense planning this required, carving a mountain from the outside in, with no room for error. How do you test such a design when a single mistake means moving millions of tons of rock? This mastery represents a leap from marking celestial events to actively staging them, using the sun as a spotlight in a divine play. This principle of dynamic light play appears across the ancient world. A famous, though now fragile, example was the sun dagger at Fajoda Butte in Choco Canyon. There, 3 large stone slabs were positioned so that slivers of sunlight fell upon a spiral petroglyph carved into the cliff face. On the summer solstice, a dagger of light pierced the center of the spiral. On the equinox, a bisecting line of light split it in 2. This transformed a static rock carving into an active celestial calendar. The light did not just arrive, it moved and changed, its shape and position telling a story that unfolded over hours and days. These effects created an interactive classroom under the open sky, where the relationship between the Earth and Sun was made visible and tangible. This was a 3-dimensional science, a fusion of architecture, astronomy, and art. The builders were thinking not just in lines and angles, but in the shifting play of shadow and illumination across the entire year. Their goal was to build a clock that ticked with the seasons, its hands made of pure sunlight. This profound synthesis of knowledge points toward a final, overarching principle, a secret language of proportion and form that may have governed the very blueprints of the cosmos. The perfect proportions of the Great Pyramid whisper of a hidden language. The ratio of its perimeter to its height is almost exactly 2 times pi, a fundamental constant of a circle. This was not a coincidence. It suggests the builders encoded a deep understanding of mathematics and the very dimensions of the Earth into their sacred architecture. For these ancient cultures, astronomy and geometry were two sides of the same coin. The same principles of harmony that govern the predictable movements of the sun and stars were believed to be reflected in specific, perfect shapes and ratios. This concept, often called sacred geometry, held that numbers and forms like the golden ratio, pi, and perfect right triangles held cosmic power. By building these principles into their monuments, they were not just constructing observatories, they were charging them with spiritual energy, making them resonant with the universe itself. This pursuit of cosmic order extended far beyond single structures. Across the British landscape, researchers like John Mitchell have proposed that sites like Glastonbury, Avebury, and Stonehenge were not isolated temples, but points in a vast, invisible network. They appear to form precise geometric patterns across miles of countryside, creating massive triangles and hexagons on the land that are aligned with the cardinal directions and key astronomical events. This turns the entire region into a single, gigantic sacred diagram. An even more staggering example lies in Mexico at the ancient city of Teotihuacan. The precise layout of its Street of the Dead and the positioning of its major pyramids are argued by some to be a scale model of our solar system. The distances between the pyramids reportedly correspond to the orbital distances of the planets from the Sun. If true, this means the entire city was designed as a symbolic representation of the cosmos, a universe in miniature where every street and building held celestial meaning. What was the source of this widespread, seemingly universal knowledge? How could cultures separated by oceans and millennia arrive at the same sophisticated principles of geometry? This points to a profound human impulse to find order in the chaos of existence. By mapping the perfect shapes of the heavens onto the earth, they were not just building for the present, they were creating a timeless, stable center for their world, a place where human life and cosmic order were forever intertwined. These long, ceremonial pathways were more than simple roads. They were cosmic arteries designed to guide the feet and the spirit in a physical reenactment of the sky's great cycles. Walking the avenue toward Stonehenge on the dawn of the summer solstice was not a passive journey. It was a ritual participation in the sun's own triumphant climb. As the community moved along that chalk-cut track, their entire world narrowed to a single, focused vista, perfectly framing the point on the horizon where the sun would first appear. This transformed a celestial event into a shared, bodily experience. The alignment was not just for seeing, it was for doing. The very act of processing together along that predetermined route, with hearts and eyes fixed on the eastern horizon, forged a powerful connection between the people, their leaders, and the cosmos they sought to honor. Similar cursus monuments, vast elongated earthworks found across the British landscape, served the same profound purpose. Their great lengths created a natural viewing tube, a channel that filtered out all distractions and directed collective attention with absolute precision toward a rising or setting body, be it the sun, the moon, or a significant star. This was astronomy in motion, a communal performance where the rhythm of human footsteps mirrored the stately dance of the heavens. Far across the world, the Inca perfected this principle in their Ceque system at Cusco. This was not one single path, but a complex web of 41 invisible lines radiating from the central temple of the sun, the Coricancha. Each Ceque line was a sacred trajectory, pointing to a specific huaca or shrine on the distant horizon. These shrines were often natural springs, unusual rock formations, or mountaintops, and each was associated with a particular celestial body, a social group, and a specific set of rituals. The entire system was a sprawling, landscape-scale calendar and observatory, mapping the social and celestial order directly onto the territory of the empire. A particular clan was responsible for maintaining the shrines along their designated Ceque, their very identity tied to the astronomical events marked by that line. How did this daily, physical engagement with the cosmos shape a person's worldview? It meant that your place in society, your ritual duties, and your understanding of time were all oriented by the same cosmic principles etched into the land you walked. The sky was not a distant mystery. It was the ultimate architect of your community's structure and rhythm, a presence felt with every step along a sacred path. This deep integration of movement, society, and the stars reveals that the true purpose of these monuments was not merely to predict, but to participate, to weave human life directly into the fabric of the universe. In the dense heart of the tropics, the sun commands the sky from a different throne. Twice each year, at the precise moment of noon, something magical happens. Every vertical object, from the tallest temple to the smallest blade of grass, suddenly casts no shadow at all. This is the Zenith passage, the moment the sun stares directly down from the center of the heavens. For cultures like the Maya, this was not merely a curiosity. It was a pivotal event in their annual cycle, a moment of immense power that demanded to be marked with architectural genius. While northern cultures tracked the sun's low path along the horizon, Mayan astronomers looked straight up, developing a science of vertical observation. They engineered special chambers with narrow, perfectly vertical tubes built directly into the roofs of their most important buildings. On every other day of the year, these tubes would emit only a faint, diffuse light. But on the two specific days when the sun passed directly overhead, a brilliant, concentrated beam of sunlight would fire down the shaft like a laser, striking a preordained spot on the chamber floor. This was a calendar of breathtaking accuracy, locked in stone. The precision required to capture this event is staggering. A zenith tube only works if it is constructed at the exact latitude where the sun passes directly overhead. Just a few miles north or south, the dates of the zenith passage shift and the alignment fails. This means the Maya possessed not just a deep knowledge of astronomy, but an intimate, practical understanding of their own position on the curved surface of the Earth. Why would a culture invest such effort in tracking a shadowless noon? The answer is written in the rhythm of life itself. The zenith passage in Mesoamerica often coincided with the beginning of the vital rainy season, the moment to prepare the Earth for planting maize. It was a celestial starting gun, signaling a time of renewal and agricultural urgency. This direct, vertical relationship with the sun fundamentally shaped their cosmology and architecture in ways distinct from the horizon-focused cultures of Europe. Their world was oriented not just to the four cardinal directions, but to the axis of the sky itself, the up and down that connected their temples directly to the heart of the sun god. This geographical adaptation reveals a profound truth, that the specific challenges and opportunities of a local environment directly forged the tools and methods of its sky watchers. And just as the sun could be tracked with a vertical tube, the moon's more complex dance inspired an even more ingenious form of portable technology, one that allowed an astronomer to hold the mechanics of the cosmos in the palm of their hand. The deep human need to predict the seasons was rooted in the most basic drive of all, survival. For the earliest farmers, a mistake in timing could mean starvation. Their most sophisticated tool was the sky itself. Picture a Neolithic farmer gazing east in the pre-dawn darkness, waiting for that one critical sign. The moment the tiny, shimmering cluster of the Pleiades rose just before the sun, it was a signal burned into cultural memory for generations. It was time to prepare the fields for sowing. This precise practice was recorded centuries later by the Greek poet Hesiod in his poem Works and Days, a written echo of an ancient oral tradition. The primary, practical engine behind many of these celestial alignments was almost certainly agriculture. Survival depended on knowing exactly when to plant, when the rains would come, and when to harvest. In a world without written records, how do you standardize this life or death knowledge for an entire community? You build a calendar in stone. These monuments prevented disputes and ensured collective action. Everyone saw the sun touch the same notch on the same stone, and everyone knew it was time to work the land. This connection is visible across the globe. The spring equinox, marked with such precision from Chichen Itza to Mnajdra, consistently aligns with the beginning of the planting season in the northern hemisphere, a moment of cosmic balance signaling a time of earthly renewal. In the Egyptian desert, the Nabta stone circle stands as one of the world's oldest known astronomical sites. Today it sits in stark, dry emptiness, but over 6,000 years ago, this was a savanna. The stones were arranged to mark the arrival of the summer monsoon rains, the critical event for pastoralists tending their herds. The stones anchored their year, telling them when to move to new pastures. This direct link to survival provides the most compelling answer for the sustained, patient effort required. How did the shift to farming enable such long-term projects? A sedentary lifestyle, rooted to one place by fields and stores of grain, allowed for the accumulation of knowledge and resources across generations. It created the stable social structure necessary to plan, to labor for years, and to see a project through that a nomadic band could never attempt. The sheer intellectual achievement is magnified by its purpose. This was not an abstract science, but a practical, vital technology for living, written in alignment with the turning world. The immense intellectual feat of the Maya long count calendar reveals a mind-bending scale of timekeeping. This was not a system for tracking seasons, but for mapping vast cosmic eras, capable of calculating dates thousands of years into the past or future with astonishing precision. This knowledge was not confined to bark paper codices. It was physically encoded into the world. The entire layout of a ceremonial center, the specific orientation of a temple doorway, and the dates recorded in its hieroglyphs were all part of a single, integrated machine for processing time. These structures were the hardware for a sophisticated software of celestial cycles. The true genius of these ancient systems lies in their complexity. They were not single-purpose calendars. A single site could simultaneously track the solar year, the lunar month, the wanderings of planets, and even the grand 26,000-year wobble of the equinoxes. This allowed for the perfect synchronization of human activity with the cosmos. The sacred festival, the royal coronation, the optimal planting day, all could be scheduled with celestial authority, creating a society perfectly in tune with the universe's rhythm. While the breathtaking Antikythera mechanism, a geared bronze computer recovered from an ancient Greek shipwreck, is a metallic echo of this knowledge, prehistoric cultures built their computers from earth and stone. Look at Stonehenge not as one circle, but as a series of nested timekeeping devices. The outer Sarsen circle, with its 30 uprights, may have tracked the days of the month. The inner circle of 56 Aubrey holes likely modeled the longer lunar cycle. The smaller Y and Z holes might have represented even more complex interactions. These were not separate features, they were gears in a massive, open-air clock, each ring turning at its own speed to model the overlapping rhythms of the sky. Maintaining and interpreting such a complex device required a dedicated intellectual class. A cadre of priest astronomers would have spent their lives observing, calculating, and updating the stone record. Their ability to predict eclipses and orchestrate the ceremonial year was not just a scientific achievement, it was a profound source of social power. This specialized knowledge justified their authority, reinforcing a social structure where a scholarly elite guided the spiritual and practical life of the community. The creation of these monumental calendars represents a pinnacle of prehistoric thought, a testament to the human drive to not just observe time, but to master it, building a stable, predictable order against the relentless flow of the cosmos. These architectural alignments were a physical language, speaking of a universe divided into sacred realms. The Inca saw the cosmos as three interconnected worlds, and this belief was literally built into their cities. The Honenpacha, the upper world of gods and celestial bodies, was mirrored in the highest, most sacred temples. The Sky Pacha, our earthly world of the living, was the plane of daily life and agriculture. And the Uku Pacha, the inner world of ancestors and origins, was represented by caves, springs, and subterranean chambers. A single structure, like the Coricancha temple in Cusco, embodied all three. Its gleaming walls touched the sky, its interior housed the living, and its foundations were laid over a sacred cave, a portal to the underworld. An astronomical alignment was never just about marking a star's position. It was about creating a bridge between these realms, a moment when the boundary between the human and the divine became thin enough to cross. This is why the specific celestial body chosen for alignment was so culturally significant. For the Maya, the planet Venus was not a point of light. It was the god Kukulkan, a deity of war and rain whose movements dictated the timing of military campaigns and royal ceremonies. Their buildings were aligned to its extreme rising and setting points, turning entire cities into instruments for tracking a god. Similarly, the Pleiades cluster was not just a seasonal marker. It was intimately tied to creation myths and the maize god, the source of life itself. This cultural lens explains the unique character of each site. At Stonehenge, the sun and moon may have been viewed as a divine pair, a celestial couple whose relationship was celebrated through the monument's dual solstice and lunar alignments. The great trilithons, those massive gateways of stone, could have framed their symbolic union, a ritual of cosmic harmony enacted in architecture. This intertwining of sky and earth reaches a spectacular scale with the Nazca lines in Peru. These vast geoglyphs, etched into the desert floor, are often aligned with celestial events like the solstice sunset, but they also point directly to sources of water in the distant mountains. For the Nazca people, survival in an arid landscape meant the heavens and the earth were partners. The lines were a prayer, a massive diagram connecting the stars in the sky to the life-giving water under the ground, reflecting a worldview where celestial power directly governed terrestrial survival. To truly decode these sites, we cannot simply measure angles with our modern scientific perspective. We must listen for the myths. We must combine the astronomer's calculations with the anthropologist's study of ritual, the archaeologist's excavation of daily life, and the art historian's reading of ancient symbols. How do we avoid imposing our own secular views onto these spiritual creations? We must remember that for their builders, the alignment was the least important part of the story. It was the meaning behind the alignment that truly mattered, a meaning written not in stone but in the soul of a culture. The journey of a single bluestone from the Preseli Hills in Wales to Salisbury Plain was a logistical nightmare executed with breathtaking precision. Transporting a 50-ton monolith over 150 miles of rugged terrain, across rivers and through forests, was an act of sheer will. Yet the greatest challenge was not just the movement but the preservation of its purpose. The stone had to arrive not just as a rock, but as a calibrated component of a celestial machine, its future position and orientation already determined by astronomer priests long before the first log was laid as a roller. This suggests a level of planning and communication that staggers the modern mind. How did they keep the vision intact from the quarry to the circle? The initial astronomical alignment, likely established using simple gnomons or shadow-casting sticks and long-term horizon observations, had to be translated into a permanent, monumental form. This transfer of knowledge from a small, temporary marker to a multi-ton, permanently fixed stone is where engineering genius met celestial science. The true marvel is that after that epic journey, the stone was erected with such exactitude that it still frames the solstice sunrise today. This feat of engineering is mirrored in the staggering precision of the Great Pyramid's base. Leveling a 13-acre limestone foundation to within a fraction of an inch was an achievement that would challenge modern contractors with laser-guided equipment. They likely used a simple yet brilliant network of trenches, flooding them with water to create a perfectly flat plane for measuring, a technique that demonstrates a profound understanding of physics. Their cardinal alignment, off by less than a 15th of a degree, was achieved by patiently tracking the stars, probably using a ceremonial circle carved directly into the bedrock before the first block was ever set. This was not haphazard construction. It was a meticulous, step-by-step process where surveying and astronomy were inseparable disciplines. To create perfect right angles for laying out their temples, they used nothing more than a long, knotted rope. By stretching a rope in a 3-4-5 ratio, they could generate a perfect right triangle, a principle known for millennia but applied here on a colossal scale. This simple tool allowed them to translate the abstract angles of the sky into the massive, physical geometry of their sacred spaces. Such projects required a society of extraordinary organization. A single visionary with a shadow stick could not build Stonehenge. It demanded the synchronized labor of quarrymen, boatwrights, rollers, rope makers, engineers, and the astronomers who provided the ultimate blueprint. How do you maintain the celestial vision across decades of construction and generations of laborers? The answer lies in a rigid, shared belief system and a stratified society where specialized knowledge was passed down within elite families. The final, silent stone is a testament to thousands of hands and minds working in concert, a physical manifestation of a culture's unified will to bridge the gap between earth and sky. The earth itself could become a celestial beast. Coiled across the Ohio landscape, the Great Serpent Mound does not merely point to the summer solstice sunset, it physically becomes the event it marks. Its undulating body, a quarter-mile long, is the serpent, and the solstice alignment is its divine purpose made visible. This is a different kind of alignment, one that moves beyond the pure geometry of sun and stone into the realm of myth. Here, the alignments are not just to the moving lights in the sky, but to the static patterns they form, the constellations, which ancient cultures saw not as random dots, but as great animals and heroes. They projected these celestial stories onto the land, creating a vast, symbolic map where every animal effigy was a chapter in a cosmic narrative. This blend of astronomy and mythology turned the entire world into a sacred illustration. The Great Sphinx of Giza, with its lion's body and human head, presents one of the most enduring mysteries. Some researchers propose that around the time of its construction, it would have gazed directly east at the constellation of Leo rising on the vernal equinox. In this view, the Sphinx was not just a statue, but a terrestrial reflection of a celestial lion, its immense strength mirroring the power of the sun god, with the equinox marking a moment of cosmic renewal. Across North America, from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi, countless earthworks were shaped in the forms of powerful animals. A massive bear effigy mound might be aligned to the solstice sunrise, linking the creature's symbolic strength and its cycle of hibernation and emergence to the sun's own yearly death and rebirth. A soaring bird effigy could point toward a specific star, representing a messenger or a soul carried to the spirit world. Decoding these zoomorphic alignments requires us to listen to the lost stories. We cannot simply measure the angle of a bear's paw. We must ask what the bear meant to the people who built it. Was it a clan totem, a spiritual guide, a symbol of the earth's fertility? The alignment gives the symbol its timing, and the symbol gives the alignment its meaning. This transforms the monument from a simple calendar into a profound statement of identity. It declares our clan is the Bear Clan and our power is tied to the sun's return. So how can we possibly distinguish a coincidental shape from an intentional design? The key lies in repetition and context. A single bird-shaped mound might be ambiguous, but if multiple bird mounds from the same culture all share a similar orientation to, say, the star Sirius, the pattern becomes undeniable. This symbolic layer challenges the hard science of archaeoastronomy to embrace the soft power of story, reminding us that for the builders, the stones were not just pointing at the sky, they were speaking its language. Deep within the sealed stone of Malta's hypogeum, sound itself becomes a physical presence. In the so-called oracle chamber, a low chant at the right frequency can make the entire room vibrate, the sound waves resonating through the limestone with an almost palpable force. Now picture that powerful acoustic event timed to coincide with a precise celestial moment, like a single shaft of sunlight piercing the darkness. This is the emerging field of archaeoacoustics, the study of sound in ancient spaces, and it suggests these monuments were designed for more than just sight. They were multi-sensory machines engineered to orchestrate profound human experience. Researchers using modern equipment have measured these resonant frequencies, finding that chambers like the one at Newgrange naturally amplify specific tones, creating a buzzing, immersive soundscape. What if the winter solstice sunrise was not just a visual spectacle, but an auditory one as well? The combination of the blinding light flooding the inner chamber and the thunderous, resonant chanting of dozens of participants could have been overwhelming to the senses. This sensory overload is a known pathway to altered states of consciousness, a method used across cultures to facilitate spiritual journeys, visions, or a feeling of direct communication with ancestors or gods. The monument, in this view, becomes an active instrument, its stone walls acting as a soundboard and its alignments triggering a scheduled performance of light and vibration. To test these ideas, scientists use audio generators and sensitive microphones to map a room's acoustic signature, identifying which frequencies cause it to ring like a bell. They then cross-reference these sonic properties with the known astronomical alignments of the site, searching for a deliberate correlation. Could the most powerful resonance have been designed to occur only when the solstice light hit a particular stone? This exploration moves us beyond cold astronomy and into the lived, felt experience of ritual. It suggests the true purpose of these places was not merely to predict the cosmos, but to let participants physically feel its rhythm, merging with the universe through a symphony of light and sound that transformed the very nature of perception. The wandering stars presented the ultimate celestial puzzle. Unlike the steady sun and the rhythmic moon, planets like Venus and Mars trace complex loops against the backdrop of fixed stars, periodically reversing their course in a motion we call retrograde. To track these erratic gods required a different kind of genius, one that moved beyond simple horizon observation into the realm of long-term mathematical modeling. While definitive proof is scarcer for the stone circles of Europe, we see this advanced knowledge fully realized in later civilizations like the Maya. Their Caracol Observatory at Chichen Itza is a marvel of planetary engineering. Its narrow, strategically placed windows are not aimed at the sun or moon, but at the extreme northern and southern setting points of Venus. For the Maya, Venus was not a planet, it was the god Kukulkan, a deity whose movements dictated the timing of war and royal ceremonies. Predicting its appearance as the morning or evening star required tracking a precise 584-day cycle, a feat that demanded generations of meticulous record-keeping. Think of the intellectual leap this represents. A solar year is a straightforward 365-day return. A lunar cycle repeats every 29 days. But the Venus cycle is an intricate dance intertwined with the solar year, a pattern that only fully repeats every 8 years. To discern this required a society that could not only observe, but could also archive data across centuries and perform the complex calculations needed to see the pattern emerge from the noise. This suggests the existence of a formalized mathematical astronomy. The scarcity of clear planetary alignments at sites like Stonehenge is telling. It may mean that their focus remained on the great luminaries that directly governed their agricultural and ritual lives. Or, more tantalizingly, it could mean that we have simply not yet cracked this deeper layer of their code. Perhaps the 56 Aubrey holes held a key to planetary cycles we have not yet discovered, or certain outlier stones marked the slow, majestic wanderings of Jupiter or Mars. What would it mean if we found such an alignment? It would fundamentally reshape our understanding of prehistoric intellect, pushing the boundaries of what we believe was possible in the deep past. It would imply that the first astronomers were not just watchers of the sky, but were its true cartographers, mapping the most complex movements of the heavens with nothing but stone, memory, and an unyielding desire to comprehend the cosmos. A tiny clay figurine from the ancient city of Çatalhöyük shows a woman seated beneath what appears to be a leopard, a powerful symbol that may represent a constellation. For decades, such artifacts were labeled simply as fertility goddesses and set aside. But what if we have been misreading the evidence all along? The interpretation of prehistoric astronomy has long been filtered through a modern, male-dominated lens, one that often assumes the grand stone circles were the exclusive domain of male priests and chieftains. New scholarship is challenging this view, asking a provocative question. What if women were the original astronomers? In many early societies, women held the profound responsibility of understanding plant cycles. They were the first botanists, the ones who knew precisely when the wild grains would ripen or when the medicinal roots were at their most potent. This intimate, life-sustaining knowledge of earthly cycles would have naturally extended to the sky, to the stars whose appearances heralded the changing seasons. A woman's ability to predict the first spring rains based on the position of the Pleiades was not magic, it was essential science. The connection goes even deeper, into the very rhythm of the human body. The lunar cycle and the average menstrual cycle share a remarkable synchronicity. This would have given women a unique, embodied understanding of the moon's 29.5-day journey. They did not need to simply observe the moon, they lived by a similar clock. This intimate relationship potentially made women the first and most natural timekeepers, their biological wisdom mirroring the celestial dance above. The evidence is carved in stone. The Venus of Lossel, a prehistoric bas-relief from France, depicts a woman holding a bison horn carved with 13 distinct notches. This is not a random number, it is the precise number of lunar cycles in a solar year. She is not merely a symbol of fertility, she is a personification of lunar time, holding the calendar itself in her hand. Reframing our interpretation to include women fundamentally changes the narrative of these monuments. It shifts the story from one of monolithic male power to one of complementary knowledge systems. How would our understanding of a site like Stonehenge change if we envisioned women as central figures in its use? Perhaps the rituals performed at the summer solstice were not only about a sun king, but also about a community of women celebrating the sun's power to nurture the crops they tended. The inner chambers of passage tombs, often seen as dark, masculine spaces of death, could instead be viewed as womb-like spaces, charged with the feminine power of rebirth as the solstice sun penetrated their deepest sanctuary. This is not about replacing one dominant narrative with another. It is about achieving a more complete and nuanced picture of prehistoric life. By asking who is really watching the sky, we begin to hear a richer, more complex story whispered from the stones, a story where the keepers of celestial knowledge were as diverse as the stars they charted. Two sacred sites an ocean apart both capture the solstice sun with uncanny precision. At Stonehenge, the dawn light pierces the heart of the circle on the longest day. At the Sun Temple of Mesa Verde, a sliver of sunlight strikes a specific spiral petroglyph high on a canyon wall at the winter solstice. This mirroring of celestial observation raises one of the most profound questions in the field. Did humanity's cosmic curiosity spark into flame independently across the globe? Or was there a slow, unseen diffusion of knowledge along forgotten routes? This is the great debate between independent invention and cultural diffusion. On one side, scholars argue that watching the sky is a universal human impulse. Any culture that depends on agriculture will eventually notice the sun's turning points. The basic idea of a solstice alignment could be discovered many times over, a natural response to a shared environment. The fundamental need to track time for survival is a powerful, universal engine for innovation, yet the similarities sometimes go deeper than mere basics. Consider the Pleiades. This small star cluster is singled out for significance from the Greek farmers guided by Hesiod to the Polynesian navigators steering their voyaging canoes, and across the Americas where it signaled the start of the planting season. Its consistent role as a celestial herald is striking. Even more specific is the independent development of a 365-day solar calendar in both ancient Egypt and among the Maya, two civilizations that supposedly had no contact. Are these parallel ideas proof of a shared human intellect, or hints of a connection we have yet to find? The evidence for independent genius is strong in the Americas. The Olmec and Maya developed concepts utterly unique to their world, like the precise tracking of the sun's zenith passage, a phenomenon irrelevant in the high latitudes of Europe. Their calendar system, while similar in length to others, operated on a completely different philosophical and ritual framework. This suggests that while the impulse to watch the sky is universal, the specific language of its observation is deeply local, shaped by environment, mythology, and need. So how can we possibly tell the difference between a shared idea and a borrowed one? The method lies in the details. Archaeoastronomers act like detectives, looking for a unique cluster of traits. If two cultures share not just a simple solstice alignment, but also the same specific number of days in a ritual cycle, the same unusual mythological story attached to a planet, and the same complex method of calculation, the case for diffusion grows stronger. Isolating these cultural fingerprints helps map the flow of human thought. It reveals our species as both brilliantly inventive in its isolation and remarkably interconnected in its curiosity, forever building bridges of understanding to the stars. A laser pulse fired from an aircraft slices through the dense Guatemalan rainforest, and with each return signal, a hidden city begins to emerge from the digital void. This is LiDAR, a technology that is fundamentally rewriting the map of the ancient world. It allows us to strip away the jungle canopy and see the landscape as the Maya engineers themselves saw it, revealing sprawling networks of causeways, reservoirs, and residential compounds that were completely invisible from the ground. What we once thought were isolated ceremonial centers are now understood to be the dense cores of vast, interconnected urban systems, many of which were deliberately oriented to celestial events. This grand scale of landscape engineering shows that astronomical alignment was not just about a single temple, but about the entire organized world of its builders, with roads and boundaries laid down according to a cosmic blueprint. With the entire site digitally mapped, the next step is to wind back the cosmic clock. Sophisticated three-dimensional modeling software allows researchers to do more than just look at a stone and guess where the sun rose. They can now simulate the precise appearance of the night sky from that exact location on any given day over the last 10,000 years, accounting for the slow wobble of the Earth's axis known as precession. This moves us beyond simple line-of-sight assessments to a truly rigorous test. An alignment that seems slightly off today might snap into perfect focus when viewed through the sky of 3,500 years ago, confirming a hypothesis with mathematical certainty. Beneath our feet, another invisible world is coming to light through ground-penetrating radar. This technology sends radar pulses into the Earth, painting a picture of buried structures without ever lifting a shovel. It can reveal the ghostly outlines of long-vanished wooden posts, the foundations of dismantled shrines, or the ditches that once held sacred marker stones. These buried features are the missing pieces of the astronomical puzzle. A solitary standing stone might seem meaningless until radar reveals it was once the centerpiece of a larger complex of markers, all working in concert to track the moon's complex dance. This convergence of technologies is transforming archaeoastronomy from a field of intriguing speculation into a data-driven science. We are no longer limited to what remains above ground. We can now see the full extent of the ancient landscape from the air, reconstruct the precise ancient sky in a computer, and peer into the Earth to find lost components. This powerful toolkit allows us to test complex theories about how multiple sites, like the great Cursus monuments and stone circles of Britain, function together as a single, integrated astronomical system across miles of countryside. The stones have held their secrets for millennia, but for the first time we have the tools to listen to their full story. The stones were more than just celestial instruments. A single monument could serve as an observatory, a cemetery, and a political statement of power all at the same time. To see these sites only as astronomical computers is to miss the rich tapestry of human experience they represent. The very ground beneath Stonehenge holds this truth. Archaeologists have unearthed the cremated remains of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of individuals, suggesting its primary role was as a domain for the dead. The solstice sunrise in this light was not merely a calendar event. It could have been a moment of profound communion, a time when the living believed the sun's life-giving power could reach into the underworld to honor their ancestors. The astronomical alignment was not the sole purpose, but a powerful mechanism within a much broader spiritual practice. This multifunctional reality is even clearer at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the world's oldest known temple complex. Its massive, T-shaped pillars are covered in intricate carvings of foxes, scorpions, and vultures, a menagerie of symbolic power that speaks to complex mythology and ritual. While some of its enclosures may have been aligned with stars, the astronomy was likely woven into a larger ceremonial fabric, one that bound the community together through shared stories and fears. These places were the heart of a community's identity. They were where laws were proclaimed, alliances forged, and healing sought. A person might journey to a sacred circle not to observe the moon, but to plead for a cure, their hope intertwined with the perceived power of the stones and the cosmos they mirrored. How do we balance the compelling lines of astronomical evidence with these other vital roles? The answer is to avoid a narrow focus. The winter solstice light penetrating a tomb becomes infinitely more meaningful when we understand it was illuminating the bones of revered forebears. The precise alignment of a temple doorway gains deeper resonance when we know it framed a procession of chanting priests carrying offerings. The true function of these monuments was not one single thing. They were the central processing units of entire cultures, integrating science, spirituality, death, and power into a single, monumental expression of what it meant to be human in a vast, mysterious cosmos. The persistent myth of ancient aliens does a profound disservice to the human past. This popular narrative suggests that our ancestors lacked the intellect to build these wonders, requiring intervention from advanced extraterrestrials. Such a claim fundamentally disrespects the immense ingenuity of prehistoric cultures. The truth, supported by decades of rigorous archaeology, reveals a far more compelling story of human achievement developed over generations. We have the quarries where stones were painstakingly extracted, the tool marks left on the rocks, the remains of worker settlements, and even the ceremonial burials of the master builders themselves. This is not a mystery without a trail, but a clear, gradual progression of engineering knowledge. The so-called impossible precision of these sites often crumbles under scientific scrutiny. While the Great Pyramid's alignment is breathtakingly accurate, it is not perfect, off by a small but measurable fraction of a degree, a human error that speaks to a human project. Many apparent mathematical marvels turn out to be modern number games, forcing connections the builders never intended. Scholars like Kenneth Feder point out that these pseudo-scientific theories often cherry-pick evidence, ignoring the vast body of data that shows how these skills evolved. Why do these fictions remain so popular? They offer a simple, sensational answer to complex questions, a shortcut that bypasses the harder, more rewarding work of true archaeological discovery. The real wonder is not that aliens might have visited, but that humanity, with nothing but stone, bone, and brilliant observation, mapped the cosmos itself. Choosing to believe in a lost super-civilization robs our own ancestors of their rightful legacy. The next time you encounter a claim about Atlantis or ancient astronauts, ask a simple question. Where is the peer-reviewed evidence? The genuine history, written in stone and star alignment, is a testament to a creativity and intelligence that belongs entirely to us. A project like Stonehenge required a social contract of staggering proportions. Think of the sheer number of people involved, not for a single season, but for generation after generation. This was not a weekend community project. It was a civilizational undertaking that demanded a stable, organized society with a powerful, unifying belief system. To move a 50-ton sarsen stone, you need hundreds of people pulling in perfect unison, directed by overseers who knew exactly where it was going. To feed those workers, you need a surplus of grain and meat, managed by administrators who could plan for months in advance. And to keep the vision alive across decades, you need a ruling class, perhaps a council of elders or priest astronomers, whose authority was so absolute that their celestial blueprint was executed with flawless precision long after they were gone. This level of cooperation marks a fundamental shift in human history. It is the transition from small, mobile bands of hunter-gatherers to a more settled, hierarchical society, a chiefdom where specialized roles became a permanent feature of life. The stone dresser, the rope maker, the ox cart driver, the astronomer, the chief, all emerged from this new social order. The very existence of these monuments is proof of a food surplus large enough to support thousands of people who were not farming, but were instead dedicated to the singular task of moving mountains. This surplus also fueled vast trade networks. The The bluestones at Stonehenge came from Wales, over 150 miles away. Their journey implies not just a route, but agreements, diplomacy, and a shared cultural value that made those particular stones worth the immense effort. So what compelled a farmer to leave his fields and haul stones for a project he would never see completed? The answer lies in ideology. The alignment of the stones to the solstice sun was not merely a scientific pursuit, it was the very foundation of that social contract. The priestly class did not just predict the seasons, they controlled the narrative of the cosmos itself. By building a machine that captured the sun's turning point, they demonstrated a sacred connection to the powers that governed life and death. Participating in the construction was not just labor, it was a religious duty, a ritual act that secured the sun's return and the community's survival. Your contribution of sweat and time bought you a share in that cosmic guarantee, and likely a share in the feasts and social status that came with it. The monument, therefore, was a physical manifestation of power. Its alignments were not just pointing to the heavens, they were projecting the authority of the ruling class back onto the people, legitimizing their leadership by linking it directly to the eternal order of the universe. The stones stand as a permanent record of the moment humanity learned to build not just with rock, but with the collective will of an entire society, all united under a single celestial story. The sky was not the only force shaping these stone calendars. A slow, relentless shift in the climate could empty the most perfectly aligned circle. The story of Nabta in the Egyptian desert is a stark reminder of this truth. For centuries, this was not a desert at all, but a seasonal savanna where pastoralists gathered. They built a stone calendar to mark the summer solstice and the arrival of life-giving monsoon rains. Then the climate changed, the rains failed, the grasslands dried up, and the land could no longer support them. Their celestial clock, so vital for survival, became a useless relic in an empty landscape. They likely migrated toward the one permanent source of water left, the Nile Valley, perhaps carrying their hard-won astronomical knowledge with them to a new home. This reveals a profound truth, that the practice of building these monuments was never isolated from the world around it. A long period of climatic stability was the essential foundation for this science. It allowed generations of sky watchers to patiently record the slow dance of the stars without the constant disruption of famine or migration. They needed a stable home from which to observe a stable sky. But when the environment became unpredictable, the cosmic order they had mapped so carefully seemed to break. A prolonged drought or a sudden cold snap would have thrown their entire world into chaos. In such times, the rituals performed at these aligned sites might have taken on a desperate, urgent tone. The precise tracking of the solstice was no longer just a calendar event. It was a plea for the sun to return and restore balance to a broken world. The location of these sacred spaces was never arbitrary. They cluster in river valleys near reliable water sources and along seasonal migration routes, places where a large, settled population could be sustained. These were the resource-rich hearts of their territories. The celestial events they tracked were often direct environmental triggers. In Egypt, the heliacal rising of Sirius, its first appearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility, coincided almost perfectly with the annual, life-giving flood of the Nile. The star did not just mark a date, it heralded the event that defined their entire civilization. The monument was the link between the celestial signal and the earthly response. To truly understand why a stone points where it does, we must therefore ask what the world looked like through the eyes of its builders. We must reconstruct the paleo-environment, the ancient climate and ecology. Was this a lush valley or an arid plain? Did the people depend on predictable floods or capricious rains? Their cosmology, their entire view of how the universe worked, was a direct reflection of their daily struggle and interaction with a living, changing Earth. How did they perceive a shift in the seasons or a failure of the rains? They likely saw it as a disruption in the cosmic order, a sign that their relationship with the gods of the sky and earth needed mending. The stones were their anchor in this relationship, a permanent prayer for harmony between the heavens above and the world they walked upon. The intellectual legacy of the megalith builders cast a long shadow across the centuries. While the great stone circles fell out of use, the astronomical knowledge they represented did not simply disappear. It likely survived in fragmented forms, passed down through oral traditions, and eventually absorbed into the practices of later cultures like the Iron Age Druids. Classical writers described the Druids as philosophers and astronomers who held the sun and moon in profound reverence, suggesting they were the inheritors of a much older, native wisdom. They did not need to reinvent the wheel of celestial observation. They stood on the shoulders of giants, inheriting a symbolic language of the sky that had been centuries in the making. This transmission of ideas creates a direct, though often blurry, line of descent from the prehistoric astronomers to the learned classes of later European history. The evidence for this continuity is etched into our very landscape and calendar. Early Christian churches were deliberately oriented to the east, toward the rising sun and the direction of Jerusalem. This was not just a biblical reference, it was a powerful echo of a far more ancient solar tradition, a symbolic alignment that would have felt instinctively right to populations whose ancestors had built Newgrange and Stonehenge. The Roman festival of Saturnalia, a time of feasting and social role reversal, was celebrated in late December, directly co-opting the profound cultural significance of the winter solstice and the sun's promised return. Even our modern Christmas, with its themes of light and rebirth, falls within this same cosmic rhythm. Today, the gathering of modern pagan and Druidic groups at Stonehenge for the solstices represents a conscious effort to reconnect with this deep past. Whether it is a genuine cultural revival or a romantic reinvention is a complex question. The true continuity lies less in unbroken ritual and more in the persistent human need to mark these celestial turning points, to find meaning in the relationship between our world and the cosmos above. How can we distinguish a direct lineage from a later inspiration? The key is to look for the underlying principle, not the superficial form. The specific gods may change, but the human impulse to align with the sun's journey remains a constant thread woven through the tapestry of history, a testament to an unbroken fascination with the sky that began with the first stones placed on a windswept plain. These silent stones are a bridge across time, connecting us to the minds of our ancestors. From the solstice light at Newgrange to the zenith tubes of the Maya, we have decoded a universal human story. It is a story not merely of ancient science, but of a profound need to find order in the cosmos and our own small place within it. These monuments are enduring testaments to human ingenuity, patience, and a spiritual depth that compelled entire societies to build for the future. They were far more than observatories. They were the very centers of their worlds, masterfully integrating science, religion, social structure, and art into a single, cohesive whole. A stone circle was a calendar, a temple, a clock, and a statement of power all at once. So the next time you look up at the night sky or stand before an ancient ruin, see them with new eyes. Do not see them as separate mysteries, but as part of a continuous human conversation with the universe, a dialogue that began with the first stone placed to mark a star's rising. We would love to hear which of these ancient astronomical methods you find most fascinating. Was it the Maya's vertical tracking of the sun, the generational patience required to map the moon, or the sheer engineering genius of the Great Pyramid? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining this decoding journey into one of history's greatest mysteries.